Excuse me, this section isn't for coach passengers. That's the first thing Raina Cole hears as she settles into seat 1A. No smile, no welcome, just suspicion, judgment, erasure. And yet, what the flight attendant doesn't know is that Raina belongs in that seat more than anyone else on board. But what happens when a teenage black girl is wrongly accused mid-flight, has her bag tossed like garbage, and doesn't scream? What if her calm becomes the spark that brings an entire airline to its knees? This isn't just a story about a plane ride. It's about silence, memory, legacy. It's about a mother's quiet strength passed down through folded letters, and a girl who turned humiliation into transformation without ever raising her voice. So, who really holds the power on board? What happens when the quietest passenger becomes the loudest reckoning? If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever watched injustice unfold and wondered what you'd do, this story is for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a moment of justice served gently but fiercely. Now, buckle up. The flight is about to begin. The floor under Gate 26A at Oakland International Airport had that faint, overwaxed shine. It reflected the early morning sun as it filtered through the wide terminal windows. Everything smelled like day-old coffee, recycled air, and hurry. People buzzed around with rolling suitcases and foam-capped lattes, barely noticing anyone but themselves. But Raina Cole noticed everything. 17, soft-spoken, tall for her age, but still shrinking when people stared too long. Her skin was warm cinnamon, her curls pinned back beneath a navy knit beanie. A canvas shoulder bag tugged at her left side weathered, stitched with care. Small pins decorated it, Maya Angelou lives. They cloned Tyrone, a tiny rainbow flag, and a faded Polaroid of her mother and grandfather smiling under a tree she didn't remember. Raina had never flown alone before, and never in first class. The ticket was a gift from Ms. Bonner, her poetry teacher. A last-minute upgrade, some frequent flyer magic. You deserve to feel like you belong there, Ms. Bonner had said with a wink. Even if the seat doesn't convince you yet. Now boarding flight 1286 to Washington, D.C., first class and active duty military. Raina took a breath, adjusted her beanie, and rose with the others. The weight of her canvas bag anchored her like memory. Her legs moved on their own calm on the outside, tightrope tense within. The flight attendant, checking boarding passes, barely looked up. Raina passed through quietly, offering a soft thank you. As she turned the corner into the first-class cabin, she saw the looks. The woman in seat 1B lowered her designer sunglasses. A businessman in 2D paused typing, watching her like a glitch in the Matrix. They didn't say anything, but they didn't have to. She reached 1C, her seat by the window, tucked her bag beneath the seat gently, like it had feelings, buckled in, tried to look like she did this all the time. Then she heard it. "Excuse me." "Ma'am," Raina looked up. The voice was clipped, professional, coded in rehearsed pleasantries. The flight attendant, tall, perfectly pressed uniform, icy blonde hair pulled into a perfect French twist, stood just beside her row. Her name tag read Karen D. in sleek script. "Yes," Raina said, offering a small, polite smile. Karen tilted her head, gaze resting just below eye contact. "First class is reserved for confirmed passengers. Can I see your boarding pass?" Raina blinked. "Sure." She reached into her coat pocket and retrieved the folded paper. printed at home. The ink was a little smudged in the top corner, where her thumb had pressed too hard from holding it so long. Karen took the paper delicately, as though it might be sticky. She examined it for 2 seconds, then looked back at Raina. "This looks printed," she said flatly. "I printed it at home. My teacher gave me the miles. I checked in online." Her voice was calm. Her palms were already sweating. Karen didn't nod, just scanned the rows, as if searching for a more plausible explanation. "Well," she said, returning the paper with a cool smile, "we'll just make sure the manifest aligns. I can show you the app. No need, just sit tight." Raina nodded, then stared ahead, eyes fixed on the seat back in front of her. Sit tight. Like she was a risk, like she might run. She glanced at the woman in 1B, still watching, now whispering something into her phone. "You deserve to feel like you belong there." "Ms." Bonner's voice echoed inside her mind like soft drum beats, but her chest ached. She didn't cry, didn't fidget, she just sat there, pressing her thumbnail into the seam of her jeans. Minutes passed. People filed in behind her, men in suits, a college-age guy in a NASA hoodie, a mother with twin toddlers. No one else questioned, no one else flagged. The crew walked past, nodding to white passengers, offering drinks and smiles. Karen returned briefly with an iPad, scrolled, nodded to herself without looking Raina's way, then moved on. No apology, no explanation, just the silent reinstatement of a judgment withdrawn but not erased. Raina let out a slow breath and reached down to check her bag. Still there, still hers. It carried everything that mattered: her notebook, earbuds, 2 protein bars, a letter from her mother sealed in floral stationery, and a flash drive with photos from last Thanksgiving before things fell apart. Everything she didn't say lived in that bag. The engines hummed to life. Flight attendants began their routines. Karen passed again with the safety demo in hand, her voice smooth and pre-recorded in tone. Raina didn't listen. She stared out the window. Oakland's skyline shrank behind her. She thought about the letter from her mom. She hadn't opened it yet. Part of her was afraid it would be a goodbye. Another part, smaller but louder, hoped it would be a beginning. Her fingers touched the edge of the canvas fabric again. Her name, Raina, embroidered in blue thread. She didn't know yet that in just a few hours, that bag would be gone. And so would any illusion of being seen as just another passenger. They were still boarding when it happened. Raina had just pulled out her journal, the small, teal one with thick, unlined pages. She didn't write anything yet, just kept her pen uncapped in her fingers, drawing small loops in the margin like she was winding herself into stillness. That's when the woman in 1B leaned slightly toward her, chin up like she was trying to smell something suspicious. "You sure you're in the right seat, sweetheart?" the woman asked. Her voice had that perfectly sweet tone, lacquered with condescension. Southern edge, blue eyes, sharp and knowing. Her nails, neatly manicured, rested on a leather tote bag like claws on polished marble. Raina looked up, met her eyes. "Yes, 1C?" The woman smiled tight and disbelieving. "I just thought maybe you'd meant row 16. That's where most of the school trips sit." "No." Raina blinked. "This is my seat." The woman's face didn't move, but her eyes said prove it. Before Raina could reach for her ticket again, a familiar shadow returned. Karen, as if summoned by discomfort. "Is there a problem?" the flight attendant asked. Voice polite but poised like a loaded slingshot. I was just helping the young lady here, the woman in 1B said sweetly. She might have mixed up her boarding group. Thought she was in economy. Karen turned to Raina with that same forced smile expression she wore earlier. We've already confirmed your boarding pass, she said carefully. However, I'll just do a double check. She pulled out her iPad again, scrolling with one finger while her other hand rested on her hip. She didn't turn the screen toward Raina. Raina stayed still, breath shallow. The businessman in 2D peeked again. A teenage boy across the aisle was watching now, too. Karen finally tapped the screen once more and gave a small nod, almost annoyed that it aligned. Seat 1C is correct, she said, but not to Raina. To the woman in 1B. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, please try not to block the aisle with your bag, though we'll need to keep that area clear. Raina opened her mouth, then closed it. Her bag had been tucked neatly under the seat in front of her. Not in the aisle, not even close. She nodded anyway. Understood, she said softly. Karen moved on. The woman in 1B leaned back with a triumphant sigh, as if she'd just done the cabin a favor. Raina stared forward. She didn't write. Didn't even move. Her fingers tensed around the pen so tightly the ink began to smudge on her palm. She remembered something her mom used to say when things got too loud at home. Silence is how we survive, but knowing when to speak is how we live. At that moment, Raina didn't feel alive. She felt reduced, invisible and hypervisible all at once. She glanced down at her lap and saw she'd accidentally drawn a circle with no ending, just an endless loop. She let her pen drop into the seat pocket. The cabin quieted as boarding wrapped. The captain's voice came over the intercom, low and practiced. Welcome aboard Flight 1286 nonstop service to Washington. D.C. will be departing shortly. The words became background noise. Karen passed by one more time. This time, she smiled toward 1B. Can I get you anything before takeoff? Oh, a sparkling water would be lovely, the woman said, glancing at Raina, with lemon, no ice. Karen nodded, turned toward Raina. And for you, Raina shook her head. I'm fine, thank you. She wasn't, but she'd learned to lie in 3 words or less. The plane backed away from the gate. Raina closed her eyes. The engine hum grew louder. So did the ache in her chest, somewhere between takeoff and 15,000 feet. Her thoughts wandered to her mother, the locked hospital room, the voicemail Raina hadn't had the courage to play yet, the guilt of not visiting enough, the confusion of loving someone you didn't always understand, to her grandfather, a stranger she barely remembered but was about to spend 2 weeks with, a retired preacher, stoic and stern, who once told her to straighten up and speak like a lady when she was 7. To herself, to this moment, sitting in a leather seat worth more than her monthly rent, yet still made to feel like a misplaced item, a stowaway in her own story. She felt movement beside her. The woman in 1B shifted, then took out her phone and began typing. Raina glanced discreetly. The screen was angled just enough to reveal a note: diversity quotas gone too far. First class doesn't mean anything anymore. The woman caught her looking and locked her phone with a smirk. Raina turned her face toward the window. Outside, the clouds stretched like bruised silk across the sky. She took a slow breath in, then opened her journal again. This time, she wrote, sometimes. They don't push you out. They just make you feel like you shouldn't have walked in. She didn't sign it, but she underlined the word feel twice. As the drink cart rolled away and seatbelt signs dinged off, Raina leaned back slightly. She didn't know this would only be the beginning, that the real disappearance hadn't happened yet, that soon her most precious belongings would be mistaken for trash. But for now, she held herself together with quiet threads, invisible but unbreakable, somewhere above Kansas. As the plane glided through the clouds with deceptive calm, Raina Cole noticed the space beneath her seat felt lighter, too light. She leaned forward, subtly brushing her foot underneath the seat in front of her. Nothing, no canvas, no strap, no bag. Her breath caught mid-rib. She leaned down further, both hands flat on the armrest to avoid bothering the woman in 1B, then checked again. Moving slower this time. Still nothing. Her heart picked up pace, not yet panic, but something close. She stood up briefly and glanced behind her, pretending to stretch. Her eyes scanned the floor beneath neighboring seats. Still no sign of the bag. It had been there when she boarded. She remembered tucking it gently beneath her feet like she always did. Now it was gone. Karen was chatting softly with another flight attendant near the galley, flipping through a service checklist as if the world were in perfect order. Raina turned back to her seat and sat slowly, gathering her thoughts. Maybe it slid back, maybe during turbulence it shifted, maybe one of the flight attendants moved it for safety. Maybe, but no one had said anything. She pressed the call button. A soft ding echoed above her seat. Karen approached, all teeth and tone. "Yes." Miss Raina sat up straighter. "Hi, sorry. My bag's missing. It was just under the seat when I boarded. A canvas one. Pins on the outside." Karen blinked. "Your personal item." "Yes. Did you leave it unattended?" Raina furrowed her brow. "Just when I went to the restroom, but it was tucked." Karen's voice interrupted, professional yet vaguely sharp. "Cabin rules state that unattended bags can be considered a security concern. We routinely move or secure items that aren't properly stowed." Raina blinked. "So, it was moved." Karen folded her arms. "I'll check with the crew, but next time, be sure to keep items with you or under direct supervision." Her voice had the tone of someone teaching a lesson. Raina gave a small nod, too quiet to say what she wanted to. Inside, her stomach twisted. That bag wasn't just a carry-on. It was everything. 10 minutes passed. 15. Karen didn't return. The flight attendants continued beverage service as if nothing was amiss. Raina tried to catch someone's eye, but everyone seemed expertly preoccupied. She looked around the cabin. The overhead bins were closed. She didn't see any other bags like hers, no canvas, no pins. She turned to the woman in 1B. "Excuse me," Raina said quietly. "Did you notice if my bag was moved earlier?" The woman raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't paying attention. Maybe someone thought it was suspicious." She smiled like it was a compliment, then turned back to her tablet. Raina pulled her tray down and opened her journal again, but her hand hovered over the page, unmoving. All her pages, her mother's sealed letter, the USB with family videos, all of it was in that bag. Her fingers trembled slightly. She tried to breathe. "It's just a mistake. Don't assume the worst." She forced herself to stay calm, but her throat felt tight. She closed the journal, no longer able to write. The turbulence returned, not intense, but enough to jostle drinks and interrupt conversations. Passengers gripped their armrests. A baby in economy began to cry softly. The overhead lights flickered briefly, then steadied. The oxygen masks didn't drop, But the cabin hushed. That quiet tension where everyone pretends they're fine while their pulse betrays the truth. Raina gripped the armrest with one hand, eyes closed, the other hand resting on her lap. She missed her mother in a way that cracked her bones, and she missed that bag more than a thing. It was her anchor. As the turbulence subsided, Raina felt someone tap her shoulder. She turned. It was a man across the aisle. He looked to be in his late 30s, brown skin, short beard, business casual button-down, friendly, but nervous. "Sorry," he said in a hushed voice, leaning closer. "I think I saw what happened." Raina blinked. "What do you mean, your bag?" "It was by your feet, right?" She nodded slowly. "I was watching when you went to the restroom," he said. "The blonde flight attendant, Karen, I guess picked it up. Looked around like she wasn't sure. Then she walked toward the back galley with it. I thought maybe she was securing it somewhere." Raina's lips parted slightly. "You saw her take it." He nodded. "Didn't feel right to say something without knowing, but you looked upset." His voice dropped even lower. "You want me to say something?" Raina hesitated. This was it, the moment to speak, to confront, but something in her held her back, not fear exactly, but something more complicated, something forged by years of being told not to make trouble, not to assume, not to escalate. Her voice came out smaller than she meant. "Not yet. Thank you." The man nodded and leaned back, adjusting his tray. Raina sat still, heart pounding. Why hadn't Karen said anything? Why move a bag without asking? She reached for the call button again, then stopped. Instead, she stood up. Her legs moved slowly, steadily, like a dream where the floor tilts sideways. She walked down the aisle toward the rear galley. A few heads turned as she passed. The curtain swayed as she pulled it aside. Karen was there, her back to her, scribbling something on a clipboard. Raina cleared her throat. "Excuse me." Karen turned, surprised. "Miss Passengers should remain in their seats during my bag," Raina said, eyes locking onto hers. "You moved it. Where is it?" Karen blinked. A flicker of something annoyance passed through her face. "We discarded it," she said plainly. "It was left unattended, and, for safety reasons, it was deemed a suspicious item." Raina stared. "You threw it away?" she asked, voice cracking on the last word. Karen crossed her arms. "We followed protocol. It's not personal." Raina swallowed. Her face burned. "But you knew it was mine," she whispered. Karen didn't reply. The floor of the rear galley was cold under her shoes, colder than the rest of the plane. It smelled faintly of coffee grounds, antiseptic wipes, and something synthetic like packaging tape and overheated plastic. Raina stood there, heart pounding so loudly she was sure Karen could hear it. "You threw it away," Raina repeated. Her voice wasn't loud, it was barely above a whisper, but it carried the unmistakable weight of disbelief. Karen's expression didn't waver. "I already explained. The item was deemed unattended and left in a non-compliant position. Under FAA regulations, it was eligible for removal. You knew it was mine," Raina said again. "I told you it was missing. I asked you twice." Karen's gaze narrowed. "I followed the same protocol I would with any passenger." Raina's eyes filled, not with tears but with a kind of burning clarity she couldn't swallow down. "No," she said softly. "You wouldn't have said nothing if it were anyone else." Karen gave a polite, defensive smile. "I think you're making this more emotional than necessary. emotional, that word weaponized like an accusation. Raina took a slow breath. There was a letter in that bag. From my mother. Karen crossed her arms. There was a flash drive with my family photos and my journal. You didn't even check. Karen exhaled, glancing toward the back curtain. Miss, I suggest you return to your seat. We're approaching light turbulence and passengers should remain buckled. You need to say what you did, Raina replied. Her voice didn't rise, but it deepened. Karen's smile flattened into a line. Return to your seat. Now. Raina turned, but not before locking eyes with her. Not before letting the silence stretch a little too long. It wasn't rage that filled her. It was presence. A quiet kind of thunder that didn't shake the cabin but rewrote the pressure in the air. When she returned to 1C, Rita Wexler didn't say a word, but she raised an eyebrow, clearly annoyed by the disturbance. Martin Reyes, across the aisle, gave her a slight nod, a question in his eyes. What happened, Raina didn't answer. She sat down, buckled in, folded her hands over her lap, and began to breathe. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. Her grandfather used to say storms never last, but they teach you the shape of your foundation. She didn't feel solid, but she felt centered. The turbulence came hard and sudden, like fate had leaned on the throttle. The plane tilted gently first, then dropped in a shiver of altitude that made everyone grip their armrests. Someone gasped in the back. Raina felt her stomach lift with the drop, but kept her eyes closed. Another dip, then a sharp jolt that rattled the overhead bins. The seatbelt light dinged. Karen's voice came over the intercom, smooth but tighter than usual. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We are experiencing a brief pocket of turbulence. Rita was gripping her tote bag tightly now, her face pale, her smugness drained. Raina remained still, poised. When it eased after 10 minutes, the cabin exhaled in unison. That's when the whispers began. 2 passengers a few rows back were murmuring one had seen Karen carry a bag that didn't look like airline equipment. Someone else in 3A asked if the black girl in 1C was okay. Martin exchanged another look with Raina. Something was shifting, not all at once, but the story was beginning to breathe outside of her. Later, as beverage service resumed, another flight attendant, not Karen, came to their row. She was younger, Latina, with a tired but kind expression. Her name tag read Andrea G. Would you like a beverage? She asked softly. Raina hesitated. Water, please. Andrea returned a moment later, crouching slightly as she handed her the cup. I heard something might have happened, she said quietly. With your personal item, Raina looked at her. Andrea added, I wasn't on that side during boarding, but I'm sorry if something went wrong. Raina nodded. Thank you. Then, gently, she said, it wasn't just a bag. It was mine. Andrea's face softened. I understand. The captain made an announcement. They were ahead of schedule. Weather in D.C. was clear, landing estimated in 2 hours. But time moved differently when you'd been emptied. Raina stared out the window, not crying, not yet, but something within her was shifting like tectonic plates, too deep to see but impossible to ignore. She reached for the in-flight magazine. It was a weak distraction. Generic articles, ads for watches, spa retreats, and private jet services she couldn't even pronounce. Then she paused. An editorial near the back, Title belonging is not luxury seat. It was about bias in air travel, subtle and overt, misidentification, profiling, how language like passenger of concern or non-compliant had been disproportionately applied to people of color, especially black women. She felt her chest tighten. The timing, the coincidence, the clarity. When Karen passed again, she didn't look at Raina. She skipped 1C entirely, but Rita Wexler noticed. She turned slightly in her seat and offered the first words of politeness since takeoff. "You all right?" Dear Raina didn't flinch. She looked at her with the kind of calm that cuts through insincerity. "Yes," she said, but Rita blinked. For once, no comeback came. 40 minutes from landing. A new voice came over the intercom. It wasn't the captain. "This is First Officer Medina. We've been informed of a discrepancy regarding a passenger's personal property. Please know that passenger safety and respect are our top priorities, and we are investigating internally. If any passenger witnessed the movement or removal of another's belongings, we invite you to share with crew upon landing." Heads turned, voices murmured, and Raina didn't move. She didn't have to. The story was writing itself now. Silence can hum louder than an engine. Raina sat in seat 1C, arms folded softly across her chest, watching the sky bleed gold through the window. Below them, the clouds had cleared, revealing patches of farmland stitched across the earth like a grandmother's quilt. No turbulence, no announcements, just the low murmur of passengers beginning to sense something was different. Karen hadn't returned to the first-class cabin since the first officer's announcement. Instead, Andrea, gracious and calm, handled the remaining service. Her steps careful, her tone neutral, but her eyes. They lingered on Raina just long enough to register something unspoken. The silence wasn't passive, it was gathering weight. Across the aisle, Martin Reyes glanced at Raina once, then again. The second time, he leaned in slightly. "They're whispering in the back," he said under his breath. "Two folks from row 5 are talking to Andrea. They said they saw Karen with your bag, too." Raina nodded slowly. "I think she knows the walls are getting smaller." Martin smirked quietly. Funny how fast altitude can shrink someone's ego. They shared a brief, tired smile, but Raina's chest was still tight. Not with anger, but ache. A long, slow bruise spreading under the ribs. 37 minutes until landing. Her mind drifted again, to the bag, to the small envelope with her mother's handwriting, to the USB drive filled with birthday videos, church choir rehearsals, and the only recording she had of her mom laughing during a thunderstorm. All gone, thrown away, discarded because someone decided it looked suspicious, because she looked misplaced. Raina had never screamed in public. She wasn't raised that way. Her mom taught her that silence was a strategy, not surrender. But what happens when the silence becomes erasure, when your stillness is interpreted as guilt? When being calm makes people comfortable enough to disrespect you? She looked down at her journal. It was blank. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she wasn't sure if saying it would even matter. Maybe it wasn't the bag. She wrote slowly. Maybe it was me. Maybe I was the thing they couldn't identify. 15 minutes later, a passenger in row 2 stood up abruptly. "I'd like to speak to the captain," the man said to Andrea. His tone wasn't aggressive, just clear. Andrea tried to keep her voice down, but first class was too small for secrets. "I'm sorry, sir. We'll need to wait until we've landed." "No," he said, gesturing to Raina. I saw what she saw. The flight attendant threw her bag in the trash bin near the galley. I don't care what protocol says you don't dispose of a child's belongings like that without due process. He glanced at Raina. I'm sorry. I should have said something earlier. Raina felt heat flood her chest. Not shame, just disbelief. She nodded, whispering, "Thank you." The man's name was Dr. Lee, pediatric oncologist, quiet, balding, probably in his 50s. He wore a green lanyard from some medical conference. People began murmuring. A woman in 3C joined in. I saw it too. The flight attendant acted like she was cleaning, but she dropped the bag like it was trash. I thought it was odd. Another passenger, middle-aged, tattooed, clearly skeptical, turned and asked, "You serious?" They threw out a kid's bag because she stepped away for a second. Raina didn't turn toward them. She stayed facing forward, hands clasped in her lap, eyes fixed on the tiny television screen playing a silent safety video loop. But inside, her pulse matched the engine's hum. Not panic, not victory, just a quiet reckoning. When the captain's voice returned, it wasn't part of the routine. "This is Captain Rodwell. We've received several in-flight reports regarding a mishandling of passenger property. Please know this incident is being formally documented and escalated to airline operations and customer safety response teams. We will be meeting with ground agents immediately upon arrival." The oxygen shifted in the cabin. Karen appeared again, just once, to collect glasses. She didn't look at Raina. Not even when Andrea stood behind her and gently guided her hand away from the seat back pocket like a shadow correcting a shadow. Raina watched her from the corner of her eye. Karen's jaw was tight, her hands twitchy, her mask of composure cracking. 15 minutes to landing. The seatbelt light flicked on again. Andrea leaned in gently toward Raina. "They've flagged your name for priority disembarkation. You'll meet with the airline's ground agent. I'm staying with you if that's okay." Raina blinked. "You don't have to. I want to," Andrea said. The wheels touched down with a slight bounce. Passengers clapped softly, a nervous habit left over from a time when flying felt riskier. As they taxied toward the gate, phones lit up, notifications, missed calls, texts, the real world creeping back in. But for Raina, the descent was only half over. The doors opened. The ground agent stepped on board with a badge and clipboard. Behind her was a man in a charcoal suit with a navy tie. He looked like someone who used words like compliance and de-escalation for a living. Andrea walked beside Raina as they stood. Martin Reyes gave a soft wave. Dr. Lee gave a nod. Rita Wexler. She avoided eye contact completely. As Raina exited the plane, the agent introduced herself as Tanya McGill, Director of Customer Experience. They led Raina to a private lounge near the terminal, clean, quiet, coffee machine in the corner. A wall of privacy glass blocked the view of other passengers. Then Tanya spoke. "Raina, may I call you that?" She nodded. "I want to start by saying this shouldn't have happened. Your voice is heard. We are reviewing security footage and cross-checking crew logs, but I want to hear directly from you. What was in your bag? What do you need us to understand?" Raina looked at her, long and deep. Then she spoke, calmly, completely. "My mother's in a psychiatric facility. I flew here with a letter she wrote to me sealed. I hadn't opened it yet. I was waiting until I got to my grandfather's house." Tanya's expression didn't change, but her breath paused. There was a flash drive with her voice recordings. Photos from when I was little. Her recipes, her jokes, it's all I had of her without a hospital ID number attached to it. Raina continued. There were also medical documents, letters I needed to give to her caseworker, my journal, the only sweatshirt I own from high school graduation. It's not just a bag. She stopped, then said, with quiet force, "It's everything I didn't say, everything you threw away." Tanya swallowed hard. "I'm so sorry." She turned to the man in the suit. "Alan, note full itemization and begin recovery chain. I want top priority from operations. And Karen, she's grounded until this investigation concludes." Raina blinked. "You're grounding her." Tanya nodded. "Her service record has been under review already. This incident may have confirmed what others hesitated to report." Raina looked down. She didn't feel proud, just exhausted, and finally seen. The lounge was still quiet when Tanya left the room. She said she'd step out and make a few calls, but Raina could tell she needed a moment to cry privately. Andrea stayed behind. She sat beside Raina without a word, pulling a granola bar from her uniform pocket and unwrapping it slowly. "You want half?" she asked gently. Raina shook her head, then cracked a thin smile. "Thanks." The silence between them wasn't awkward. It felt safe, like a porch swing in early spring, just enough movement to remind you the world keeps going. Andrea glanced at her. "What was your mom like before that word, before, was tender? It didn't assume, didn't judge. It gave space." Raina swallowed. "Funny. Loud when she danced. She used to do this thing with a wooden spoon like it was a microphone." Andrea chuckled. "A performer. She loved Aretha. And biscuits." Andrea smiled. "Power combo." There was a pause. Then Raina added, "Quieter. She started forgetting names around my 9th birthday. Got paranoid after a while. She thought the kitchen clock was spying on her." Andrea didn't flinch, just nodded, listening. She had one clear week. Raina continued. "When I graduated, she held my face and said, 'You'll go higher than I ever could.' That was the last real sentence I remember." Her voice cracked slightly. "And now the last thing she gave me is gone." Andrea reached for a napkin, handed it gently. "Maybe not. You never know what survives." 10 minutes later, Alan Navarro re-entered with a small cardboard box in his hands. Everyone in the room turned. Tanya followed behind him, eyes fixed on the box like it was a relic. "We recovered this from Terminal C sanitation," Alan said. The bag had already been moved to disposal prep, but it hadn't been compacted. A night custodian flagged it because of the embroidery on the strap. Andrea raised an eyebrow. "Embroidery?" "Yeah," Alan said. "There's a stitched line on the strap that says, 'Love, Mama C.'" Raina felt the air leave her lungs. Her hands trembled. "May I?" she asked, voice barely there. Alan nodded and placed the box in front of her like it was made of glass. The zipper was halfway open. Inside her journal, wrapped in a navy hoodie. The USB drive in the mesh pocket. The letter slightly creased but still sealed in the inner sleeve, with her mother's handwriting for Raina. "Open when you're ready." She held it to her chest. A silent sob shook through her body. Not loud, not dramatic, but deep. Grief and relief braided together in one breathless exhale. Tanya looked like she was about to cry again, but said softly, "We'd like to offer you compensation and a formal apology. But more than that, an opportunity." Raina blinked. "What kind of opportunity? The company would like to invite you to speak, if you're willing. about your experience at our next DEI summit. You don't have to say yes now." Raina didn't answer. Her fingers rested on the sealed envelope. She wasn't ready, but maybe soon. Andrea walked her to the airport exit. They'd offered her a hotel, a car service, even a counselor on call. But Raina said no. "I need to go to my grandfather's. I promised him I'd come." They hugged at the curb, not long, not loud, but real. "Thank you," Raina said. Andrea shook her head. "No, thank you. Some storms are worth flying through." Her grandfather's house was old, southern bricked, wrapped in jasmine vines and memories. He opened the door before she knocked. No questions, just a hand on her back and a kiss to her forehead. That night, Raina sat on the back porch with a blanket wrapped around her knees. Crickets chirped. A dog barked somewhere down the road, and lightning bugs flickered near the magnolia tree. She held the letter in her hand. Still unopened, she thought about the flight, about Karen, about the moment she was made invisible, and how the silence afterward became her sharpest form of truth. She didn't want revenge. She wanted change. When she opened the envelope, the paper shook in her hands. Her mother's handwriting was uneven but familiar Raina. "If you're reading this, I'm proud of you, not because you're strong, but because you let yourself feel. Don't carry silence like armor. Speak when it matters. Cry when it hurts. They'll call you difficult when you're clear. They'll call you emotional when you're human. Be both. Be all. Be free. I loved you the moment I knew I existed, and I will keep loving you no matter what you lose or reclaim. Mama, see?" Raina didn't cry. She wept, because some letters return even when you think the world threw them away, because some people fight by simply existing fully, because silence, when chosen, not forced, is a kind of language all its own. 2 weeks later, the email arrived. Subject line, "Your voice matters. Invitation to Atlantic Airways Summit." Raina almost deleted it, but something in the phrasing made her pause. It wasn't performative. It was restrained and direct. The body of the email was from Tanya McGill, not a generic PR rep. "We've reflected on our responsibility, not just in what happened to you, but how many others have quietly walked away without the chance to speak. You don't owe us anything, but if you're willing, we'd like to invite you to our Internal Diversity and Accountability Summit in Chicago. Your story has already sparked change. Your presence could shape more." Attached was an itinerary, a direct flight, hotel booked, car service arranged, all optional. Raina didn't answer right away. She called her grandfather instead. Walter Cole was on his porch, coffee in hand, eyes on the field beyond the pecan trees. She said it's optional. He asked, "Yeah." He nodded slowly. "You ever seen what happens when a river stays silent too long?" Raina smiled. "It overflows. No, it carves new ground. Quiet's got power, but only if it moves." She boarded the flight that Friday afternoon, not in first class, not in coach either. They put her in a new category guest of airline, row 2A, reserved for special events and employees under internal review procedures. Funny how systems build new terms when they're forced to confront the old ones. Andrea wasn't on that flight, but another flight attendant, older, slower moving, paused at Raina's row and said, "You're her, right?" The girl who didn't yell but still made waves, Raina blinked. "I guess so." The woman leaned in slightly. "Thank you. For all of us who wanted to speak up but didn't know how." The summit was held in a high-rise conference center just outside downtown. Glass walls, neutral colors, polished faces, the kind of place built to say we care, but often used to control narratives. Raina walked in wearing a navy blue dress and her mother's cross necklace. She didn't bring slides. She didn't need a presentation. She was the presentation. Tanya greeted her at the door with a hug, firm but respectful. "You don't have to say anything you don't want to," Tanya said. "The floor is yours for as long or as little as you need." Inside the room, about 30 people, all Atlantic employees, some in leadership, some in uniform, a few corporate consultants, and near the window, trying to remain unnoticed, was Karen Devereux. Her presence wasn't announced, but Raina felt it instantly. Tanya cleared her throat and introduced the session. This isn't about checklists or boxes. It's about courage. Raina Cole didn't just bring a complaint, she brought reflection. She reminded us who we serve and why listening matters more than image. Then she stepped aside, and Raina stood. She took her time. No microphone, no cue cards, just her voice. Even, clear, measured. 2 weeks ago, I boarded flight 720 with a carry-on bag and a sealed letter from my mother. By the end of that flight, both had been taken from me. A few faces winced. She continued. The letter survived. But the story doesn't end with the bag. It begins with what that bag represented: grief, memory, identity. What happened wasn't about airline protocol. It was about perception. She paused, then said, "There's a kind of profiling that doesn't yell racial slurs. It just makes decisions in silence. A young black girl alone in first class must be suspicious, must be a mistake, must be corrected, quietly, without record." A flight manager in the back shifted in his seat. Karen didn't ask. She didn't check. She decided, and that decision almost erased the last voice I had from my mother. Raina took a breath, looked directly at Karen. "I'm not here to shame you. I'm here because silence is no longer my strategy." The room was still. No clapping, no theatrics, just breath, held. Then Tanya stood again. "We're opening this to feedback." A man in a blazer raised his hand. "Corporate HR, judging by the badge, Ms. Cole. What would you like to see changed?" Raina thought carefully. "Training is nice. Statements are fine. But if you want change, start with the chain of assumptions. Review who gets flagged for unclaimed baggage when it's clearly labeled. Track which passengers get extra scrutiny in first class. And maybe reevaluate who you're promoting to supervise flights." Another pause. Then, for the first time, Karen stood up. She didn't defend herself. She didn't blame protocol. She said, eyes low, "I made a judgment that wasn't mine to make. I apologize." Raina studied her, not to humiliate, but to gauge sincerity. And in that moment, she realized something. Karen looked tired, not from work, from consequence, afterward in the lobby. Tanya handed Raina a small envelope, inside a check, substantial, a formal settlement, but also a note. "This doesn't erase anything, but may it fund what comes next." Raina folded it carefully. "Thank you, but I'd rather you fund a scholarship in my mother's name." Tanya blinked. "You sure?" "I'm sure." That night, Raina stood by her hotel window, staring down at the skyline. Somewhere in her pocket was the flash drive. Somewhere in her chest was something new, not closure, but momentum. Raina waited until she was home to plug in the flash drive. She could have done it in the hotel, on the plane, even on her grandfather's old computer. But something inside her needed stillness. Familiar walls, the smell of her own books and lavender lotion and laundry sheets. It wasn't nostalgia, it was readiness. She slid the drive into her laptop and waited. One folder, titled in all caps, Raina, open when you're strong enough. She hesitated, then clicked. There were only 3 files, 2 video files, 1 Word document. The first video was time-stamped nearly 4 years ago, the year her mother had her final evaluation before permanent care. Raina clicked it. The screen shook for a second before stabilizing. A nurse's voice could be heard saying, "Okay, Miss Camille, whenever you're ready." Then came her mother's face. Camille Cole, hair tied back, eyes clear but cautious. She looked into the camera like she could see the future, like she could see her baby girl. If you're watching this, then life did what life does. It moved forward. Maybe it left some things behind. But not this, not you. Raina's hands covered her mouth. Tears welled up immediately. Her mother continued, "There's gonna be days you wonder why people see you as a question instead of an answer. Don't let them turn your clarity into a debate." Camille smiled. "Some will think your silence is weakness. It's not. It's choice. You come from women who learned to speak only when it counted, when it cut, when it healed." The video fuzzed a little. "Then I hope you forgive the world before it earns it. Because carrying rage is heavy, and I didn't raise you to carry anyone else's ignorance." A pause. Then, softly, "Whatever happened, whether it was on a flight, a boardroom, a hospital room, remember, baby, your name is not for forgetting, it's for building things that last." The screen went black. Raina sobbed, not loudly, not theatrically, just fully, letting it rise, letting it wash, letting it land. She clicked the second video. It was different. No message. Just clips stitched together. Old school style, Camille cooking, humming along to Anita Baker, laughing with Raina over a science fair volcano, singing terribly in the car, looking up and yelling, "Don't film this." I looked busted while grinning anyway. One moment, Raina was 8, on a swing, yelling, "Push me higher." Mom, then another Raina at 15, dancing at prom. Her mother recording from the driveway. And the last clip, a birthday candle flickering. Camille holding it like a torch. Make a wish, love, and say it out loud. Young Raina's voice off screen. "I want us to be okay forever." Cut to black. The Word document was a letter, typed, formal. It was titled, "For the Future, What I Wanted to Say in Court." Raina skimmed and froze. It was written to a judge, a guardianship dispute. Apparently, before her illness worsened, Camille had tried to legally assign Raina's future care to Walter Cole, her grandfather, not Raina's estranged father, Aaron Lawton. Raina blinked at the name. She'd only heard it once, long ago, a man who left before she was born. No contact, no photos. Camille's letter outlined why. Aaron was never abusive, but he was absent. He didn't want a daughter, didn't want responsibility. Now, as my memory fades, I fear his sudden interest is financial, not parental. The words hit like a slow knife. Her mother had fought quietly, legally, strategically, even in decline. She had protected her. Raina sat back. The pieces were coming together, and a fire was building in her chest. She dialed Tanya. Late, she didn't care. Tanya answered, groggy. "Raina, I need access to your legal records." Raina said, "What kind of records?" Any connections your firm has to Aaron Lawton? I just found something." Tanya paused. That name came up once, in a recent internal audit. I'll look. Raina closed her laptop. She didn't cry again. This wasn't grief. It was clarity. The next morning, Tanya called back. "You were right," she said. "He was retained briefly as a consultant for one of our private investors. Small contract, but the overlap in dates is suspicious." Raina clenched her jaw. "Is he still active?" "No, but his name is on the guest list for the fall shareholders event. That means he's either back or trying to be." Raina's voice dropped an octave. "Then it's time I show up too." She didn't want revenge. She wanted recognition. For her mother, for herself, for every story discarded without a headline. Later that night, Raina opened the last clip again. Her mother's laugh echoed through the speakers. So full, so unbothered. It reminded Raina that no one could erase her roots. Not with protocol, not with indifference, not with a trash bin. She whispered aloud almost to the screen, "I see you, Mom," and in the stillness of her room, she swore she heard the swing creak again. The shareholders' event wasn't meant to be emotional. It was catered, choreographed, and bland by design charcuterie tables, white florals, and scripted welcomes. The kind of event where everyone's badge hangs heavy, but their smiles stay light. But when Raina Cole walked into that ballroom, the temperature shifted. She wore a simple black suit, no accessories except her mother's cross necklace, and the name tag she wore said nothing about who she was, just guest of Tanya McGill. No title, no company, but eyes turned, because stories travel faster than press releases. Tanya met her by the refreshment table. "He's here," she said. "We're table 7, with the private equity reps." Raina followed her gaze, a tall man in a gray suit. Well-kept, expensive haircut, casual charm. He was laughing at something someone said, but his eyes were scanning, waiting. And when they finally landed on Raina, he froze. Aaron Lawton hadn't seen his daughter in 17 years. Not really. Not since the blurred hospital hallway where Camille refused to let him in after Raina's 4th birthday. His expression was unreadable, somewhere between shock and discomfort. He stood. Raina didn't walk faster. She didn't stop, either. She moved through the crowd like water calm, inevitable. "Raina," he said, tone low. She studied him. "Mr. Lawton." That landed like a slap. He tried to recover. "You've grown. I wasn't sure you never were." She cut in gently. His jaw worked. "I heard about what happened. With the flight. The video made its rounds. I wanted to reach out." She tilted her head, but didn't. "I thought maybe, after everything, we could—" "No." The word wasn't sharp. It was final. She stepped in closer, lowered her voice. "You didn't want a child. You wanted a legacy you didn't have to raise." He swallowed. "That's not fair. I'm not here for fair," she said. "I'm here for truth." The people nearby pretended not to listen, but conversations dipped, heads tilted, silence pooled. Aaron leaned forward slightly, trying to lower the tension. "You don't understand what your mother and I stop." It wasn't loud, but the command in it cut through like glass. "You don't get to rewrite her choices now that she's not here to defend them." He exhaled. "Raina, I'm sorry. I was young, scared, but I'm here now. I want to be part of your life." She stared at him, then reached into her coat, pulled out a printed letter, Camille's guardianship document. She handed it to him. You had 17 years to care. You didn't. But you had time to show up for her, to check in, to help. You didn't. Aaron's face fell as he scanned the paper. It wasn't anger on her face now. It was peace and distance. I'm not angry, she added. I'm just done pretending you were ever a question mark. She took a step back. You're not my villain. You're not even a page. You're a footnote in a book she protected with her life. Aaron's eyes were glassy now. He sat back down, alone. Tanya approached quietly. You okay? Raina nodded once, then whispered, Let's finish this. On stage. Tanya gave a brief speech about accountability, progress, and how we must measure our impact not just in dollars, but in dignity. Then she invited Raina up. No introduction, just presence. Raina stood at the podium, microphone low, lighting soft. She didn't speak from paper. You all know what happened, or at least what went viral. A black girl in seat 1A, a carry-on thrown away, a silence that echoed louder than any press statement. A pause. But here's what you don't know. That bag contained a letter from my mother. One of the last things she wrote before her memory left her. Several people stiffened. It was thrown away not because of its size, or weight, or risk, but because someone didn't believe I belonged in the seat I'd paid for. Because when you see a young black girl alone in first class, you ask why before you ask who. She let the words settle. This isn't about suing a flight attendant. It's about confronting how perception becomes policy when no one challenges it. The room was stone still. I'm not here for applause. I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here because if I stay silent, I become part of the system that failed my mother and almost failed me. Another pause, so I'll keep speaking. For her, for myself, for every girl who gets stared at like a problem in spaces she earned. She stepped back, no bow, no smile, just clarity. That night, as the crowd slowly dispersed, a white woman in her 50s approached, her eyes damp, voice low. My daughter's black, adopted. She's 16. She watched the video. She cried for 2 hours. She said you reminded her that silence isn't the same as surrender. Raina nodded. Tell her she's right, she said softly. Tell her silence, when chosen, is a form of flight. It began with a single photo. Someone at the shareholders' event, maybe an assistant, maybe a consultant, snapped a picture of Raina standing alone at the podium. No filters, no flash, just her. Backlit by soft golden light, wearing that calm expression that didn't ask for attention but held it anyway. The caption was short. The girl in 1A didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard, and within 24 hours, the internet lit up. Major outlets picked it up first, then the think pieces, then the hashtags. Seat 1A trended for 4 days, not because of drama, but because people had grown tired of injustice masked as procedure, and in Raina, they saw something rare, grace without compromise, a face that didn't scream, but wouldn't look away either. She wasn't given interviews. Tanya fielded most of the press, but the headlines kept shifting from teen shamed on airline to something deeper. How a girl's quiet stand reframed corporate training nationwide. Raina Cole didn't just reclaim her seat. She changed the culture. At the same time, something else happened. A group of flight attendants, black, Latino, Asian, even some white, sent an open letter to Atlantic Airways leadership. It began with, "We have remained silent long enough out of fear." Raina Cole's story reminded us that dignity doesn't require volume. It requires visibility. The letter detailed years of overlooked complaints, inappropriate comments, unequal treatment, retaliation, suppressed performance reviews. It was signed by 47 employees, and it hit like a thunderclap. Karen Devereux was officially dismissed within the week. The announcement was respectful but firm. We acknowledge that personal bias affected her professional judgment. We are instituting mandatory bias awareness certification across all ranks, effective immediately. But Raina didn't post a reaction. She wasn't celebrating a firing. She was watching a shift. One evening, Tanya called her, "Turn on Channel 8. She said, Raina did. A national broadcast, panel format, and in the middle, a child psychologist was speaking. We often tell young black girls to speak louder, to be assertive. But what Raina Cole did was show that dignity isn't volume, it's intention. Her refusal to perform pain gave us a new framework. What does resistance look like when it's refined? Another panelist nodded. She reminded us that the burden of proof should never rest on the wounded. Raina muted the TV, not because she was overwhelmed, because she was listening more deeply than ever before. She started getting letters, not emails, not tweets, letters, handwritten, some from girls her age, some from grandmothers, even one from a 42-year-old black pilot named Maurice who wrote, "I watched that video and cried. Not for you because I knew you'd be okay. I cried for the 24-year-old me who kept apologizing for taking up space. Thank you for showing us we never had to." Raina saved them in a shoebox, not for display, for remembering, for anchoring. Then came the request from the Root, an op-ed slot. Tanya asked if she wanted to pass, but Raina said yes and wrote the entire thing in one sitting. It was titled, "I Was Never Just the Girl" in 1A. In it, she wrote my mother's letter never used the word justice. It used words like legacy, freedom, and rest. That's what I carried in that bag. That's what was nearly discarded. But more than that, I carried a truth no flight manifest could list. I belong, even when the world needs convincing. The article received over 4 million reads in 2 days. Universities requested to use it in curriculum. The Smithsonian emailed Tanya. So did a media platform asking to option the story into a short film. Raina said no to most of it, except one thing. She agreed to visit a local middle school, not to speak, just to attend. She sat quietly in the back as students discussed how it feels when adults get it wrong. One girl raised her hand. I saw the clip of Raina. I liked how she didn't fight back the way people expected. She didn't play into the script. A boy next to her nodded. Yeah. She reminded me that being calm doesn't mean being weak. That night, Raina wrote in her notebook something simple. Sometimes a whisper breaks more walls than a scream. Still, she wasn't untouched by it all. Fame is noisy, so she took walks with her grandfather, with herself. She went to the park Camille used to love. She brought flowers, lavender, placed them by the bench where her mother would read, then sat. Let the wind speak, and remembered a sentence from her mother's letter. You don't have to be loud to change the story. You just have to own your page. That night, Raina pulled out a blank journal. On the first page, she wrote one word begin. 3 weeks later. Raina sat across from the CEO of Atlantic Airways. It wasn't court-ordered. It wasn't even publicized. It was quiet, intentional. held in a glass office overlooking a tarmac where planes hummed and shimmered in the heat. The CEO, a poised woman in her late 40s named Isabel Cortez, spoke gently. First, I want to say, I'm sorry. She didn't flinch, didn't try to oversell it, just placed the words like bricks, meant to build something. Raina nodded once. She didn't smile. Cortez continued. You weren't just mishandled. You were erased. We can't fix the past. But we want to ask, would you be willing to help shape the future? On the table between them sat a proposal folder. Inside a position, consultant, Youth Representation Advisory Board, a $50,000 stipend, 3 scheduled campaign interviews, her image, her name, paired with corporate messaging about rebuilding trust and a new sky. Raina studied the document, then looked up. I need to ask something. Cortez met her gaze. Please, if there hadn't been a video, or headlines, or shares, would I still be here? The CEO didn't blink. No. Raina exhaled. I appreciate your honesty. Cortez leaned in slightly. But it matters that you are now. She let Raina take her time. Didn't push, didn't pitch, just waited. Finally. Raina closed the folder. I'm not here for publicity. I understand. And I don't want to be the face of your repair. A pause. But I'll help design the foundation. That changed everything. 2 weeks later, a press release went out, but not about a sponsorship deal. Instead, Atlantic Airways announced the formation of a new cross-agency panel, the Flight Equity Alliance. No billboards, no hashtags, just structural commitments. Blind resume protocols for cabin staff. Anonymous reporting lines monitored by third parties. Mandatory de-escalation and cultural humility training. Youth advisory representation seats voted by community orgs. And at the bottom, in tiny print, special thanks to R.E. for her vision and clarity. No last name, no photo, Raina's condition, let the work speak. Walter Cole sat beside her on the porch as the press release pinged her phone. He handed her a mug of tea. Your mom would have liked that, the quiet kind of justice. Raina smiled, the kind that sticks, but not everyone was content with the soft landing. A journalist from a major national outlet reached out. Then another. They wanted deeper scoops. What did Raina think of Karen Devereaux's lawsuit claiming wrongful termination under media pressure? What about the critics accusing her of weaponizing silence for profit? Was she going to sue the airline personally? Raina didn't answer. But she wrote something new in her notebook. Power isn't in the story they tell. It's in the story I keep. Then came something unexpected. A girl named Mila, 13, sent Raina a painting. It was childlike, unpolished, but powerful. It showed a young black girl standing at a plain gate. Everyone else in the picture was colorless, muted outlines, except for her. Her skin glowed, her hair curled like armor. She held a suitcase with one word scribbled on it, truth, on the back. Mila had written, I'm scared when I fly sometimes, but I draw you when I feel strong. Raina placed it above her desk, right next to her mother's letter. That evening, Tanya stopped by for dinner. She brought pie. Raina brought questions. Why do you think this mattered so much to people, she asked. Tanya paused. Because you didn't try to become a symbol. You just refused to disappear. She sipped her tea. People needed someone who didn't flinch, who didn't perform trauma for clicks, who just stood. Raina nodded. Is that enough? Tanya smiled softly. It was everything. That night, Raina went on her first flight since the incident. Not for business, not for activism, just to fly. She chose Seat 1A again. Purposely, a new flight attendant greeted her, young, nervous, black. Her name tag read Amira. She glanced at Raina's boarding pass, paused, eyes widened for a second recognition, but instead of awkwardness, she leaned in and whispered, "Thank you." For keeping the door open, Raina said nothing, but nodded, slowly. As the plane took off, she stared out the window, sky turning pink, a slow ascent. Her fingers brushed the seat arm, not clenched, not shaking, just present. Somewhere behind her, someone asked loudly for more pretzels. Someone else laughed too hard at a bad movie. Life, unbothered. She liked that. Above the clouds, she took out her notebook again. Wrote, "My mother gave me this silence, but I made it sing." 1 year later, Raina returned to the sky. No headlines, no protests, no camera phones, just a woman and a one-way ticket to her mother's favorite city, Savannah, Georgia. She didn't choose Seat 1A this time. She chose 2D, window seat, quiet row, slightly removed, because this trip wasn't about proving anything. It was about breathing. The flight was calm, a little turbulence, an overzealous toddler, but otherwise uneventful. And sometimes uneventful is its own kind of grace. As the plane leveled, Raina reached into her carry-on, not the same bag that was thrown away. That one had been recovered, cleaned, folded gently into a museum exhibit request she declined. But inside this bag was something new, something old. Her mother's journal, the real one, not letters, not posthumous guidance, just Camille's own handwriting from when she was Raina's age, a young black girl trying to understand the world. Raina flipped through a few pages, paused at an entry. June 4th. I sat on the steps and watched planes pass over the rooftops. I used to think they were angels with engines. I want to ride one, but I'm scared, not of the height, of being the only one like me on board. Raina closed the book softly, pressed it to her chest. When the flight landed, no one cheered, just the soft shuffle of feet, the clicks of seat belts, a casual thank you from a tired crew, and sunlight spilling through the windows. She stepped out onto the jet bridge slowly. Let her lungs fill with ground air, let her feet feel the steadiness of arrival. In Savannah. She didn't go straight to the hotel. She visited the library first, the one her mother once donated to anonymously. She found a small wooden plaque on the wall near the children's wing. For every girl who thought her voice was too soft to matter, see, no surname. But Raina knew, and now others would, too. She left a copy of her op-ed from the route tucked quietly into a donation envelope, didn't sign it, just wrote, "For the next whisperer." That night, as the sky turned indigo over the marshes, Raina stood barefoot on the porch of a rented guest house. No phone, no schedule, just wind and the sound of cicadas. She whispered, "Thank you," to no one in particular, and yet to everyone who ever kept her standing. Weeks later, she received a letter from Amira, the flight attendant, who had quietly thanked her in seat 1A. Inside was a photo, a group of new trainees, all shades, all smiles. At the bottom, a note. "We made it in because you showed us we could. I'm staying, and I'm watching from the inside." Raina pinned it to her wall, next to Mila's painting, next to Camille's journal, next to the boarding pass that once questioned her place, and now defined her path. She didn't become an influencer, didn't take book deals, didn't launch a foundation. She chose something else. She enrolled in a graduate program in cultural psychology, studied how trauma travels and how silence can sometimes be the strongest shield. On the first day of class, the professor asked everyone to share a quote that defined them. Raina stood, looked down, then recited what she had once written in a moment of quiet rebellion. My mother gave me this silence, but I made it sing. The class went still. Then, applause. Not thunderous, but full, warm, true. That night, she wrote the final entry in her notebook. Not every flight ends in chaos. Some end in clarity, some begin again. I am not the girl in 1A. I am the voice that seat couldn't hold. And with that, the story closed. Not with vengeance, not with spectacle, but with presence, with choice, with a sky that remembered her name and never forgot the girl who claimed her seat with silence. Raina Cole never intended to become a symbol. She didn't ask for headlines, hashtags, or viral praise. All she wanted was to fly in peace, to carry her mother's memory with dignity. But when her silence was mistaken for weakness, she did something extraordinary. She held her ground, quietly, calmly, completely, and in doing so, she sparked a movement, not through revenge, but through remembrance, not through rage, but through restraint. She reminded us that the most powerful form of protest isn't always loud, it's true. That a bag isn't just luggage, it's legacy. That every seat has a story. This isn't just about Raina. It's about every young girl who's ever been told she doesn't belong. Every voice that was quieted. Every name that was mispronounced or dismissed. But the sky remembers her name now. And so do we. If this story moved you, if it made you think, feel, or reflect, we ask you to stand with stories like Raina's. Please like, share, and subscribe to support voices that need to be heard, especially the ones that speak with quiet strength. More stories are coming, and you won't want to miss a single one. Until then, stay kind, stay strong, and remember sometimes the calmest passenger rewrites the flight path.